lot of different types of truth in the world, and I'm relaxed about that. Scientific truth, theological truth, superstitious truth, all those different types of truth, intuitive truth. I'm relaxed about all of that. There's a new truth in town. Wow, it's not a new truth, but I hear a lot more of it these days. A type of truth called my truth. I want to speak my truth. I hear a lot more of that than I think I ever heard of before. I want to speak my truth to the world. But I think the emphasis is on the word truth. I want to speak my truth to the world. My truth. My truth. And I think by calling a thing something like my truth, I think it gives it a status that it possibly doesn't deserve. I want to speak my truth to the world. Now, by giving it a pretty lofty title like that, my truth, it almost seems to put it on a par with scientific truth, for example, or theological truth, or some sort of collective truth or whatever, or some sort of well-tested truth. But I feel that if you line up all the different types of truth, then if you have in your head some truth that is your truth, well, let's talk about me, not you. If I have in my head something that for me is a truth, that, I have something in my head that is my truth, and I kind of announce proudly that I've got something in my head that is my truth. And I want to make a podcast, or whatever this thing is, a YouTube video, and tell you all about my truth. I think it's, because I think we get encouraged these days. Find your truth. So, all right, I've found my truth. And but if I have found my truth, and if it really is seriously my truth and not a scientific truth that I'm just calling my truth, like I can say, my truth is that an apple, when it falls from the tree, falls at an acceleration of 9.81 meters per second squared. That's not my truth. I can call it my truth, but it's actually a scientific truth. It's been tested a lot. No, I think my truth is one that it can't be a different type of truth, because if it was a different type of truth, like a theological truth or a scientific truth, then the fact that you call it your truth, or if I call it my truth, doesn't make it your truth or my truth. No, something that's my truth is something that I just believe. Excuse me. Had to cough. No, something that you call your truth is just something that's yours, Look, other people might possess it as well. And I don't think it's got a lot of, I don't think it stacks up well against some of these other truths, like scientific truth and theological truth. I think when people say, like if I was to get on to this YouTube-y thing and say, listen, I want to chat about a scientific truth, which doesn't necessarily have to be a theological truth, because there's all different types of truth. But, I've got a scientific truth, as it were, because scientific truth, the truth of science is, a scientific truth is only true until, pending, any evidence to the contrary, because scientists get excited if their truth is smashed up by new evidence to hand. That's the very definition of science. Look, all that aside. But if I'm going to get onto a YouTube-y thing and say, listen, I want to talk to you about a scientific truth that's been tested many, many times in the world. And then you jump onto YouTube and say, I want to tell you about my truth. I want the world to know about my truth. And I say, I want the world to know not about my truth, but some scientific truth that I know. And then another guy over there, a priest, says, I want to tell you about a theological truth of some sort, you know. Look, semantics on the word truth, you know. I think that of those three truths, the theological truth, the scientific truth, you know, those two have been tried and tested theoretically over centuries by millions of people. You know, the theological truth and the scientific truth. And then you come up with, you know, what you call your truth, you know, my truth. All right. Okay, so we've got a priest, a scientist, and me. The priest says, I want to talk to you about theological truth, a theological truth that has been tried and tested over centuries. And then the scientist says, well, I want to tell you about a scientific truth, so to speak, you know. And then I step up and I say, I want to tell the world about my truth. Mine hasn't been tested by anyone except me, theoretically. By giving it a title like my truth, it almost makes it sound as noble as a scientific truth or this other one, a theological truth, you know, or even a superstitious truth, which is, I don't know what the difference between that and a theological truth is. All right. So myself, the scientist, and the theologian, I think I'm tempted as I make an episode about This Is My Truth. I'm tempted to think that that stacks up well against an episode, a YouTube episode, by this scientist who wants to tell you about some scientific truth, so to speak. I'm tempted to think that my truth stacks up well against this other, you know, heavily tested truth over here. But it doesn't. I suspect my truth, even though it's got a lofty title, and it sounds kind of noble, you know, and it doesn't matter whether you disagree with my truth, it's my truth. And I want to tell you about my truth, and I want the world to know my truth. Because I am so serene about my truth, I'm tempted to think that it stacks up well against a scientific truth or a theological truth or various other types of truths. But actually, as lofty as it sounds, until it's been tested properly by peers, other people, and lots of them, I suspect it's not worth a pinch of shit.